Okay, so this material is a transcript of a commentary video. It's highly critical of Megyn Kelly's defense of Candace Owens, specifically around the accusations involving Kirk and Turning Point USA. Let's just dive right in.
Yeah, let's do it.
Look, the core here is this justified outrage. You can feel it. It's about what the narrator sees as, well, blatant hypocrisy and maybe feigned ignorance from Megyn Kelly.
Right.
The analysis is sharp in places, and the evidence pulled together is actually pretty compelling. But I think there's a huge opportunity here to really boost the impact by refining the tone and, the delivery.
Okay.
So first big point, shifting the narrative away from this very emotional condemnation towards a more objective analysis will significantly increase the material's persuasive power and its overall impact.
I think that's spot on. There's a tendency here, maybe, to let the heat of the moment kind of overwhelm the light of the fact. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see that.
The weakness is really the heavy reliance on hyperbole and these intensely personal, highly charged adjectives. Calling Candace Owens the epitome of a dingbat, or saying Megyn Kelly is actually disgusting and a coward. And while the sentiment behind it is clear, that level of emotional saturation, this focus on labeling character, it really risks pushing away listeners.
Even listeners who might agree with the core points, right?
Exactly. People who might otherwise be receptive to the factual inconsistencies you're pointing out, they just get turned off by the sheer negativity.
Such a common trap in commentary, isn't it? You feel the injustice so strongly you reach for the strongest words.
Right, but often the strongest words aren't the most loaded ones. They're the most precise, fact-based.
Absolutely. So the suggestion for improvement here is pretty straightforward. Focus rigorously on analyzing the subject's actions and their inconsistency. Don't label their character.
Let the actions speak.
You've got some excellent evidence here, especially, like you mentioned, the timing of Kelly's investigation. That needs to be the star. Let that evidence lead the audience, naturally, to conclude there's bad faith, without the narrator having to explicitly scream it with these really negative labels.
The evidence itself should do the moral heavy lifting, not the adjectives.
Right. So let's break that down with some actionable examples. Think about that central inconsistency you pointed out. Kelly only investigated after Ben Shapiro brings up the accusation that Owens claimed Kirk killed her husband.
Despite it being all over X for ages.
Exactly. That timing is the indictment. If you just lay out that sequence of events clearly, you don't actually need to call Kelly a coward. The facts are damning enough.
It's such a powerful demonstration of selective attention, isn't it? And, the word coward almost minimizes it because it shifts it from a structural critique to just a personal insult.
Good point.
So instead of calling her a coward, you focus on the fact that her moral compass apparently needed a claim of murder to get activated. While weeks of other accusations about Turning Point USA were just background noise, that speaks volumes more powerfully.
It really does. And we can apply that same thinking to the Owens critique, too. Like, take out phrases like, "You are the epitome of a dingbat."
Please, yeah.
And instead, zoom in on the hypocrisy of her claims. Owen says, rarely in politics do you see someone lie so brazenly.
Right.
And the narrator's counterpoint that lying happens left, right, and center in politics is actually a great factual rebuttal. It shows the absurdity of her statement.
The factual contrast is just much more effective and less dismissive than resorting to name-calling.
Exactly. So if you minimize terms like disgusting, vile, narcissist, you elevate the whole critique. Think about the analysis you already have in there. The material notes Owens stops short of saying a name explicitly, so she has plausible deniability.
That's a sharp observation.
It is. And that specific, calculated behavior is manipulative. So point out the calculation, the strategy. That makes the moral judgment inherent.
The listener figures out the behavior is indefensible because they see the mechanics of the gears turning.
Not just because the narrator threw a strong adjective at them. Yeah, it's about replacing that raw condemnation with, dissection.
Dissection, I like that.
Dissecting the strategy is just far more engaging and, frankly, more intellectually rigorous for the audience. We want them angry because the facts lead them there, not just because they're following the host's emotional cues.
Makes sense. And once we adjust that tone, let the sharp evidence speak for itself, well, we realize we actually have quite a lot of sharp evidence.
We do. Which brings us to the next point, organization.
Right. Need some tightening.
Okay, second main point. Right now, the material risks diluting its primary focus, so
tightening the central argument to focus primarily on Megyn Kelly's perceived feigned ignorance will prevent the core message from getting lost in sort of tangential critiques.
Yeah, I see that structural issue immediately. It feels like the material tries to tackle too many high-stakes things at once.
Right. You've got Kelly's response, then Candace Owens' lack of recent evidence for verifiable lies, then the history of the 2018 texts, and a little detour into Owens' fan base being conditioned.
It's a lot, and when you try to make like 4 separate big points in one commentary piece, the audience often struggles to remember any of them clearly.
Exactly. And the weakness here is that this sprawling scope, it just weakens the narrative flow, especially because, as we said, the narrative is absolutely strongest when it's zeroed in on Kelly's selective attention.
That's the freshest angle. It's the most damning observation in the whole script, I think.
Agreed. So the suggestion is recenter the argument entirely around that observation, the timing and the nature of Megyn Kelly's investigation.
Make that the spine of the piece.
Precisely. Use the critiques of Owens, her reliance on old evidence, the substance of her claims, use those solely as context.
Ah, okay. Support, not the main event?
Right. They prove how long the situation was ignored, how obvious the toxicity was, which makes Kelly's failure to investigate until the murder claim even more glaring.
So Kelly's selective investigation becomes the North Star for the whole narrative.
Exactly. And this means repositioning some really valuable analysis that's already there. For instance, there's that insightful breakdown of Owens' rhetorical strategy.
The 2 roles for Erica Kirk, yeah? Grieving widow and CEO?
Yes. That analysis that Owens is laying the groundwork for criticizing her directly, that's really clever. But where should it live in this refocused script?
Well, it shouldn't be its own separate tangent. It should be brought in to directly support the main claim against Kelly.
How so?
You present Owens' calculated maneuver, this sophisticated rhetorical game being played out in the open.
Okay.
And then you pivot right back, pointing out that this proves Kelly should have known the true, calculated nature of Owens' rhetoric long before the murder claim surfaced.
Ah, I see. It demonstrates the context Kelly was willfully ignoring.
Precisely. It makes the narrative flow much cleaner. Here's the complex game Owens was playing, and here's how Kelly seemingly pretended she didn't even know the rules until the stakes got impossibly high.
That works. That really strengthens the central argument.
And we can also probably condense the discussion on Owens' claims of verifiable lies from Turning Point USA.
Yeah, that part felt a bit lengthy.
The core point there is simply that the narrator hasn't seen proof, only debunking, right?
Right.
So make that point concisely, maybe just one strong sentence. Then quickly pivot back to Kelly's failure to investigate the substance of Owens' ongoing claims earlier.
Highlighting that Kelly's focus clearly wasn't on journalistic integrity or fact-checking the whole time.
Exactly. It was only triggered by the sensational, easy-to-condemn accusation. That contrast is key.
Okay, so we need to ensure that powerful detail, Kelly's focus being drawn only by the murder claim, is the clear, recurring theme.
It needs to be the narrative anchor. Yeah, all the context about Owens should just serve to amplify the significance of Kelly's failure at that specific moment.
Got it. That structural fix will make the whole piece feel much tighter, more focused.
Definitely more impactful. It's like the difference between a scattergun approach and one clean, precise punch.
Well put. Okay, that brings us nicely to our third major area of opportunity. This one's about how we interpret the actions we've just critiqued.
Ah, the why.
Exactly. This is where the critique can move from just sharp observation to potentially more nuanced political analysis.
Okay, I'm listening.
So third point, strengthening the connection between the observed behavior and the assumed motive will elevate the material from simple accusation to a more sophisticated political critique.
Right. This is often the tricky part, isn't it? Moving from what happened to why it happened.
It is. And I think this is where commentary can really shine, moving from just calling people out to analyzing the system.
So what's the weakness here currently?
The weakness is that the material frequently attributes internal psychological motives, things like fear or calculated strategy. It says things like she's afraid or suggests Kelly has something on her.
The blackmail idea.
Yeah, without really substantiating these internal states beyond the timing of her investigation, which we've already discussed.
So it feels a bit like an educated guess, maybe, rather than a fully supported argument.
Exactly. And the comparison to Kelly being unwilling to fight the 800-pound gorilla, referring to Tucker Carlson, that's a brilliant observation.
It's very evocative.
But it's currently presented as a definitive explanation. She's afraid, rather than, say, a plausible theory backed by evidence of her strategic media incentives.
Okay, so we need to pull back from claiming to know what Kelly feels or believes internally.
That's the core suggestion. Treat the attribution of internal motive like fear as a hypothesis that needs support. Or, maybe even better, shift the critique entirely.
Shift it how?
Shift it to analyzing the structural incentives and the media alliances that explain the observed outcomes of Kelly's behavior.
Okay. Focus on the system, not the psyche.
Precisely. Frame the selective investigation as clear evidence of, say, political allegiance or brand protection, which is verifiable from her actions and associations, rather than personal cowardice, which is ultimately unknowable.
That's a critical distinction for making the commentary compelling but also defensible. So, when discussing that 800-pound gorilla comparison,
We should shift the language. Move away from stating definitively, Kelly is afraid.
and instead suggest?
Suggest that her actions serve to maintain strategic alignment within her particular media landscape.
That makes sense. The material actually has an incredible quote here. Her fight is not with anyone on the right, except when you're Ben Shapiro.
That's a brilliant observation, because it points to a consistent outcome.
Right. So lean into analyzing what incentives, what brand protection needs, what professional alliances create that specific observable outcome.
Is she avoiding Tucker Carlson because of deep-seated fear, maybe? Or is it because politically, structurally, it's just disadvantageous for her brand and her alliances to start a public fight with him?
The second explanation feels like a much stronger, more analytical argument, less speculative.
Exactly. And instead of just asserting none of this is genuine, focus on that specific devastating analysis you already have. Clarification only seems important to Megyn for select people.
That observation about media bias is powerful.
Use that insight to explore the broader implication, like established media figures providing cover for the lies and dark souls of Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson.
Okay, framing it that way really shifts the focus. It moves the discussion from Kelly is just a person with a personal flaw to Kelly is potentially an essential part of a destructive media ecosystem.
And that critique is much harder to simply dismiss, isn't it? It transcends individual personality and addresses a systemic political alignment.
Definitely. So let's revisit the Candace Owens behavior too, holding just short of saying a name explicitly so she has plausible deniability.
Right. A seasoned journalist like Kelly must have recognized that tactic. It's not exactly subtle.
So the failure isn't necessarily that Kelly is personally being blackmailed, like you said. We just don't know that. It's pure speculation.
The observable failure is that she seemingly ignores the strategic bad faith of an ally, perhaps to maintain her own brand alignment or political positioning.
That's an observable political critique, not a psychological guess. And it makes the entire piece feel smarter, more robust.
I completely agree. By letting the analysis of alliances and strategic media moves guide the conclusion about motive, the critique becomes significantly sharper.
And much harder for anyone to just wave away as simple political bias or personal animosity. You've got really powerful material. This shift just makes the underlying structure, the scaffolding, basically unbreakable.
Okay, great. So let's quickly summarize the 3 key actionable areas for improvement for this commentary script. First,
manage the tone to boost credibility.
Right. Let the strong evidence do the heavy lifting. Reduce the emotional saturation. Avoid those personal character attacks.
Second, focus the narrative squarely on Megyn Kelly's specific inconsistencies, particularly the feigned ignorance around the timing of her investigation.
And use the critiques of Candace Owens as powerful context as support, not as separate competing arguments that dilute the main point.
Exactly.
And third, substantiate those assumed motives. Move beyond guesswork about fear or cowardice.
Analyze the observable incentives and the political alignments instead. Frame Kelly's selective behavior as a strategic outcome tied to her place in the conservative media world.
Perfect. Look, you have a really compelling case here. It's built on excellent textual evidence and some sharp observations.
Absolutely. Applying these structural and tonal adjustments, I think it will transform this material. it'll become a truly powerful, analytically superior piece of commentary.
We strongly encourage you to implement these suggestions. Rework the script with these points in mind.
Yeah, let the evidence shine, tighten that focus on Kelly, and analyze the incentive.
And please submit the revised material back to us. We'd be very interested to see how it evolves.